Matt or Blake, do you need time to set up? Okay. Just a reminder, after this talk, we'll have a short break. So if you need to go to the restroom or get more coffee or food, it's still available. Next up, we have Blake Matthews with Learning in AI. Okay.
Are we moving? Okay, we need a minute. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Think you sure? You sure? Okay. All right, so I have a loud voice, so I don't really need the microphone. I'm Blake Matthews. This is Marcy Colquitt. That's really right. I'm going to stand down here. My shoes are really loud. So I am a, future former computer science teacher. This is my last year in the classroom. I've been teaching computer science for 11 years. And I'm graduating 2 weeks ago with my Master's of Science in Information Technology. And I'm going to talk about some things that we have seen in education as AI has become more of a thing.
It'll help with the recording.
Oh, okay. Let's give it a start over there.
Yeah, I think you get mine.
Okay, so my name is Blake Matthews. I am a future former educator. I have been teaching computer science for about 11 years, and I'm going to be talking about some things that we have seen in education as AI has come into the picture. Some benefits, some downsides, and then at the end we're going to show off a project that we've been working on that came out of some research I was doing in my master's and took on some practical application in the classroom. So we're calling this Personalized Learning in the Age of AI. Marcy.
Hi everyone, I'm Marceline. I just graduated last Friday from Southside High School. I'm planning to go to NYU in the fall, so I'm his kind of student consultant as well as web developer for his TutorGPT project. I'm certified in a couple programming languages, and I mean, I just have a passion really for wanting to progress. I want to keep going and keep learning, and I want to help people in the process of that. So I'll be talking about the traditional education and more personalized education that AI can really bring for us. So with traditional education, a classroom setting, it's harder for a lot of students to really get that personalized talking to, like, one-on-one time with teachers, because some students might have sports after school so they can't come in after class. You don't want to come in during your lunch because you want to eat. So it's hard to get that one-on-one talk, as well as you got to go at the pace of the slowest kid in the classroom, which For some students that works. Some students need to keep busy and keep learning to be engaged in the classroom. Otherwise, they start to fall behind because they get bored. As well as there's an issue with grading. It takes up to a week. Sometimes even teachers take 2 months to grade your stuff. But and
never their teacher.
he never taught me. I've heard he's got a good track record with keeping the grades up, though. Then there's limited opportunity for that individual talk, like being able to really just connect. While
that's part of why this project came to be, is I had this year a classroom with 39 introductory students in Programming 1. And I don't think that 29 students can be effectively taught all at completely different levels. They all came in with completely different skill levels and learning rates, and we were trying to learn as much Python as they could learn with 29 students for 48 minutes. It's not a very effective way to teach. And so I had some students that probably could have started in a level 2 class that were just sitting there bored. And they needed some type of personalized assistance. And I honestly couldn't give it just because the number of students that needed a greater level of help. And so they were turning to ChatGPT. And I was fine with that. But ChatGPT doesn't know how to be a teacher. It was giving them assistance at an inappropriate level for them, which led to the research project that I worked on.
I'd like to speak more on that as well. Throughout my certification exams I took this previous year, especially learning C++, ChatGPT was really instrumental for me to be able to learn some of the harder topics and like actually grasp them, because I was learning on my own just through online courses. So being able to ask exactly what I wanted to know and be able to learn that information is very beneficial, especially when you want to know something on a deadline and keep going forward, which is part of the reason why the personalized education that AI can bring really is beneficial. Because you can adapt it, what you want to know, what you care about, what your hobbies are, as well as you get that feedback immediately. And then if you're motivated enough, you can learn a lot faster, in my personal opinion, than you can in a traditional classroom. Now, educators do have some concerns with the rise of generative AI, but I think the pros do outweigh the cons with generative AI, such as concerns about the academic integrity. A lot of teachers think, oh, you're just going to use ChatGPT to cheat. That's what I've really experienced through my time in high school. Everyone's like, no, don't use ChatGPT. You can't use it at all because it is terrible. Like, it's got a really bad stigma, honestly. Oh, is it?
Yeah, they even blocked complete access to it through the school computers.
I didn't know.
The teachers were convinced that all the students would only use it to cheat.
Wow, I didn't really know that. Huh. Then it brings some challenges with authentic learning, because ChatGPT itself was not written to teach you. It was more or less written to provide you that information and just give it to you without really trying to guide you along your path of learning that information. And as well as an AI model, it doesn't understand really what it's telling you. It's just telling you. Some students with ChatGPT also are more or less engaged, because if ChatGPT can do it, why on earth do I ever need to do it? Well, because you're eventually going to get in a professional field where you might be stuck somewhere and you can't use it. Then it creates academic pressure and grade inflation. With the rise of ChatGPT, teachers have became a lot more harsh with grading, is what I've noticed, because you can get that information immediately, so your answers better be right, or else what's stopping you? While that doesn't incentivize learning, it incentivizes regurgitating that information just on a sheet of paper. Then some of our classroom pros for benefiting from it: recognizing the potential and wanting students to actually learn and utilize AI as a tool instead of a cheat, like a calculator. You're able to use a calculator in math class because you get to a point you can't really go forward without it. Students are becoming more engaged and invested because they're learning at the pace they want to, rather than waiting around. Oh, I did my assignment for this week on Monday. Now I gotta wait till Friday to hear back anything. Then personalized content. AI can teach you in a way like you want to hear. Like if you are very interested in game development, you can learn in a game development perspective based on the software you'll use, like Unreal Engine, C++, the Unreal Engine Blueprint software. And then it can create an infinite number of assignments and grade them every single time. Now I'm going to pass it off to Blake.
Okay, so there's a lot of ways that teachers or trainers can use generative AI to make their training or classrooms more effective. They can use it to do what they were already doing, but do it quicker and more effectively. So one thing that I used to do in some of my classes is I would go home and I would plan a code along. And so I would write out the project, I would code it, I would make it work, I would make sure that I had each step that we were going to do working, then I would add a step, and we would have multiple steps that we were going to go through, and each step had to work as we went through. And that would take me a fair amount of time spent in the evening. And what I was able to do after I attached Copilot to my VS Code in my classroom, is I would walk up to the board and I would whiteboard code and just leave blanks in there. And it would all just be as they came up with the idea. I would ask them for, well, what do we want to put here? What do we want to call this variable? What are we going to do with this function? And write it out in whiteboard code. And something that would have taken me 15, 20 minutes to do in the evening at home to be prepared to do all this in front of them the next day, now I could go whiteboard code it and then have them go work on it while I went and took roll for the class, and go sit down at my computer and collaborating with Copilot, the thing that used to take me 15 to 20 minutes, I could do in about 2.5. Because I would start writing it and I would get a quarter of a line down, and I'd have all of the things that I had done pulled up as context, and so it knew how I wrote code, and it would write me the next 3 lines the same way that I had already written it in the past, and it'd be 90% right, and I'd fix the little things that were wrong, type the next couple of characters, and suggest another couple of lines, it'd be mostly right, I'd fix it, we'd move on. And by the time that I used to bring up the project, I could have the complete 45 lines or so written and working and pulled up on this computer so we could do the code along. And so instead of doing the exact thing that I planned the night before, like I used to do, now we got to do exactly what they wanted to, the thing that they came up with as a group. So they were more engaged, they were more excited about learning it. And so on top of that, let's go back to that one classroom that I had that's just way too many students in a class, okay? And I had those students that they really shouldn't have been in that class. They should have been in a more advanced class, and they were bored. How many of you, when you were in school or you went to a training or something, you knew most of the thing that they were talking about? And you sat there on your laptop and you half paid attention and mostly did something else. That's what they were. That's how they were in that class. But a couple of them really wanted to know it. They were there because they wanted to know the thing. And so they went and found resources. Some of them were looking at blogs that had terrible information. Some of them were on ChatGPT, and they were getting information back to them that was way over their heads. They didn't know enough to understand what it was saying. The things that it were saying was right or mostly right, but they didn't understand it. And so a lot of you have probably used ChatGPT or Llama or something as a tool to help you learn something that you were fuzzy on, or to take something in one language and transfer it to another. You realize that it can be used as a powerful tool for learning, but you have to really, really know how to use it. And the people that could really benefit from it the most are the ones that don't know how to use it. And so the future of personalized learning with large language models is not these giant foundation models that are trained on 80% of the internet, okay? Because they're trained with information from Stack Overflow and GitHub and Reddit and random blogs with bad information. So you're going to get bad stuff and way over level stuff and outdated stuff. What we need are small, perfect data sets of exactly what that group needs to learn. Okay? And we can have multiple of them. Could even be like a mixture of elements, mixture of experts model, where we've got multiple small models that are each controlled by a routing model. And so that was what I decided to work on for my master's research project. I started to make something that I eventually started to call TutorGPT, just because I needed something to call it. And I used some prompt engineering techniques to get GPT-4 to pretend to be a tutor. And I had it communicate with GPT 3.5 pretending to be an 8th grader learning Python. And had it, through the API, had them having conversations back and forth, and I was moderating. I was giving GPT-4 feedback so that it could give better responses. And as I went through, I would keep the good conversations and give feedback on the bad conversations until it was giving very good output. Started collecting those conversations into a data set that I was able to use to fine-tune a GPT 3.5 model. And so that's what became TutorGPT. And that's what I was working on. And then about a week ago, I actually saw on LinkedIn an announcement from Khan Academy, their collaboration with Microsoft. Microsoft has funded their project called Conmigo, and they're doing basically the same thing. They have decided that this is the same goal that they want to work on. They want to make these small models designed to teach specific subject areas, and they're going to be training. Right now they have it working, it looks like, through prompt engineering for GPT 3.5, but from their interviews it sounds like they're trying to fine-tune the Microsoft Phi smaller model in order to behave in the same way. And I think that eventually there will still be the large language general purpose models that do 80% of the tasks 90% well for some people. But for specialized purposes, these smaller fine-tuned models, I think, are going to be much more common. And so I've got a video of TutorGPT on the left and GPT-4 on the right, giving it the same inputs. And yeah, for somebody that already knows a fair amount about the subject, the information on the right is probably what they're looking for. For somebody that knows nothing or very little, it's overwhelming, and it's just going to scare them. So for somebody new to a subject, this guided process that a smaller, more finely tuned model can provide this very specific experience that they might need. So that's what I've been working on. That's question time. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Like the smaller, like what's the emphasis in smaller models, I guess?
So for the smaller, it's just requires a smaller data set in order to fine tune the guardrails. For people that are really going to use it for what it's for, not much difference, and it does actually reduce its power. I completely agree. But another thing that goes with that is the people that really need this, like I'm thinking about high school students, junior high students, how to teach them more effectively, because that's the arena that I've been in for the last decade. And as I was letting some of my students try this out, the third student I let try this, you want to know what the third or fourth thing they typed in? What's the top level in Star Wars Empire something? And that's when I realized that the fact that it has the power to do all the things was actually a downside. Because it's a downside to increasing, like, I'm not saying that we should have less technology in classrooms. I'm a technology teacher, or have been, okay? But there are definitely students for which Chromebooks in the classroom and computers in the classroom are a detriment to their learning, because they only see them as a way to distract themselves from learning. And giving them a tool like GPT-4 is just another tool to help them get off task. And so that was step 3 for me, was I made about 25% of the data set redirects for trying to go off task. So I made it where if they tried to ask about video games, or they tried to ask about inappropriate things, that it would say, hey, let's go back to learning what you're supposed to be learning, but we could learn about Python related to video games. Why don't we make a pirate video game instead of talking about pirates? And so trying to take that thing that they wanted to distract themselves with and use it to engage them instead. Take the thing that they were trying to disengage with and use it to engage them. And it's something that would take an enormous amount of data in the data set for one of the really large foundation models.
We've got time for one quick question, and then we'll probably get to a break for a while.
So the question I have for you, since this is your full-time project that you're working on, have you ever thought of maybe applying to Y Combinator to kind of give you that focus and energy, and even a cache infusion to kind of get it to where you're seeing it in your head? Because I can kind of see what you're trying to do, but then going from at this point to there's a big gap, and I didn't know if that's what your future plans are.
Yeah, so that wasn't necessarily a goal. This was just meant to be a research project for my master's, and then it became, oh man, this is actually useful in my classroom. And then all of my students just kept telling me how awesome it was for them and how much faster they were able to learn. And so it started to kind of take on a life of its own, to where we started to think about maybe spinning it into a startup. I'm not necessarily trying to make a software startup. I've never done anything like that before. I did consider Y Combinator, and the deadline's in like yesterday, I think. But yeah, it's something that's on our radar to possibly maybe consider at some point. Yes.